McOsker.
Here.
Soto Martinez.
Here.
3 members and a quorum, Madam Chair.
All right, fantastic. So we will now proceed to general public comment for members of the public wishing to give general comment or comment on items specific on our agenda today. I will turn it over to the city clerk to provide the necessary information for the public to dial in, and our city attorney can explain the speaking rules to members of the public who are calling in. So, Mr. Clerk, would you please read the instructions for the public?
Members of the public who would like to offer public comment on the items listed on the agenda should call 1-669-254-5252 and use meeting ID number 161-769-6039 and then press pound. Press pound again when prompted for participant ID. Once admitted into the meeting, press *9 to request to speak.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Clerk. Mr. City Attorney?
Thank you, Chairwoman. To members of the public calling in, when it is your turn to speak, please state which of the agenda items you would like to speak on. You have 1 minute per item to speak, 2 minutes total for multiple agenda items, and 1 minute for general public comment, and we will tell you when your time is up. When speaking on the agenda items, you must be on topic. If you're making a general public comment, you must address topics in the jurisdiction of this committee. If you're not speaking on topic, or if you cannot tell whether you're speaking on topic, you will get 1 brief warning from the chair or me. And if you do not immediately get back on topic or again stray off topic, the chair will cut you off and you will forfeit the rest of your speaking time. Finally, for members of the public calling in to speak, as soon as you hear someone address you, you are live in the committee meeting. If you're also listening to the meeting on your computer, channel 35 or other device, please turn down the volume on those devices immediately to avoid an echo. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Hong. So with that, we are ready to begin public comment. Do we have any callers in the queue?
Yes. Caller, please state your name and the items you'd like to speak on.
Okay, I guess that's me. Can you guys hear me?
We can. Can you tell me what items you would like to speak on?
Item 1 and 2, those 2 motions.
And
okay, what's your name?
My name is Timmy. I'm calling from the community group in San Fernando Valley. I'm trying to seek responsible aviation for Van Nuys.
All right, you have 2 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Well, I see that there's been a change in the council members on the committee, so I hope you guys will give deference to your Valley Council members and the CD5, which is impacted in the Santa Monica Mountains, the upper northern end of her district. Clearly, these 2 motions are critically needed, or they would not have been put forward. So that would be despite LAWA's insistence that they engage with community, that they have been transparent, et cetera, et cetera. If that were true, motion 1489 would not have been put forward. So I'm going to assume that's going to go through without issue. So I want to address 1125. LAW is going to be given a report today, and I can only imagine that they're going to spend the majority of the time, if not all the time, saying that the FAA has jurisdiction, that they can't do anything, that the city can't do anything, that the FAA, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That is not true. We as a city actually did have ability to curtail these jet charters. We still do. And it was because LAWA defied the existing airport plan and did not create the needed policy as dictated by that plan to limit hangar and ramp sizes to reasonable development that would not overwhelm the sustainability that our natural environments in the valley could realistically absorb. That failure is why we have the issue that there is today. So when you hear their report, I want you to keep that in mind, because there's going to be things that we're pushing to bring before City Council as a whole. And it has to do with the inadequacies and the irresponsible stewardship, even if it was unwitting. You know, I want to give people the benefit of the doubt. I get it. Not everybody has foresight.
I hate to interrupt you, but I do want to thank you for your comments. You're unfortunately out of time. Thank you, caller. Do we have anyone else in the queue?
Yes. Next caller, if you could please state your name and the items you'd like to speak on.
Is it my turn now?
Yes.
It is. You could state your
Yes,
name and the items you'd like to speak on, please.
I would like to speak on agenda item 1 and 2, the motions before this committee on Van Nuys Airport.
Okay, what's your name?
Tom?
All right, Tom, you have 2 minutes. Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi there. I'm a citizen of Sherman Oaks, a resident, and I would also like to remind you that the Sherman Oaks Neighborhood Council send in CISs on both of these motions. They should get passed. There's a lot of stuff that's gone on at Van Nuys that shouldn't have gone on, that was done without public notice, without the proper environmental report, and without proper notice to the public, and this might be able to bring some light to them. What I do find a little interesting is I thought it would be good if the public could comment after LAWA does a presentation and says how they've done everything right, because they haven't. And that would be a chance for the public to talk about the presentation that is going to be given to you today, which would probably be a little more appropriate. But please pass both of those motions, send them on to the city council so the city attorney can look into the expansion of charter flights and how the detriment to the public it's been and how it needs to be curtailed. And also 1489, which asks the city, LAWA, to report back on all the public engagements they did, because they didn't. We've caught them claiming it to the BOAC that they've done engagement, and they haven't. So this needs to be rectified, and these 2 motions are a great way to get LAWA to step up and say what they actually did and how they built the largest jet port in the country, surrounded by densely populated neighborhoods without any public notice or proper public notice, and how detrimental it has been to the public for the pollution, the toxic emissions, the leaded fuels from the piston aircraft. Jets are a huge problem at Van Nuys, and the citizens have been complaining about it for decades. The master plan, which they did not follow, and why these motions are before you now,
Okay,
was
Tom.
written 18
Tom,
years
I'm
ago.
so sorry. I hate to cut you off, but unfortunately, you are out of time. Are there any other callers?
There are no more callers in the queue wishing to speak.
All right, thank you for that. So that will conclude public comment. So moving on to today's business in front of us, unless there is any objection from my colleagues, I would like to move items 1, 5, and 6 on consent. Any objections? Seeing none, Mr. Clerk, if you would, please call the roll.
Park,
Yes.
McOsker,
Yes.
Soto Martinez.
Yes.
3 ayes, and those items have been approved.
All right, thank you very much. Let's move on to item number 2. Mr. Clerk, if you would, please read the item for us.
Item number 2, Los Angeles World Airports to provide a verbal report on motion Martinez Blumenfield relative to actions to be taken to address the increase of scheduled charter operations at the Van Nuys Airport.
Okay, thank you. Do we have representatives here today from LAWA who can give us a report on this item? It appears that we do. LAWA, Glenda, is that
Yes.
you?
Hi, Chair Park. This is Justin Urbachi from Los Angeles World Airports.
Fantastic. Mr. Abachi, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Park and council members. Want to give you a little bit of an overview here of Van Nuys, since it's the first item before all of you regarding Van Nuys. So just a little brief background about the airport itself, and then some of the activities that we've been doing there. So Van Nuys is one of the busiest, if not the busiest, general aviation airport in the United States. It has 2 runways. One is a bigger runway and one is a smaller runway, 8,000 feet and 4,000 feet. They have approximately just under 70,000 jet operations in 2022. The idea, we have 4 fixed-based operators that are there, and that fixed-based operators are companies who service the airplanes, give the airplanes a place to land, park, fuel up, and things of that nature. And then those are Castle and Cook Aviation, maybe Clay Lacy, Jet Aviation, and Signature Flight Support. We also have 200 other businesses that are located at the Van Nuys Airport, and that's about 10,000 jobs that are really directly supported by airport activity. There also is 19 flight schools on campus, and we account for about $2 billion in annual economic activity generated from the airport. So it's a significant enabler for the economy of that region and the entire Los Angeles region here. We also are big enough that we have an FAA staff tower that operates not 24/7, but from about 6 in the morning till a little before 11 at night. Just to go down next, we are run the airport, but we are also part of the community there. So we are committed to community and education there. We have various types of activities that we run there. So you can see some of them here at Aviation Career Day, where we take in students from the regions and introduce them to all the activities and potential careers in aviation. And we have different types of activities with different groups in the area. We volunteer in different types of events. So very, very active in the community as well. Next slide, please. We also are very committed to sustainability. We have a lot of initiatives as part of our overall LAWA Sustainability Action Plan to help us to minimize the amount of emissions and to make sure we're being sustainable neighbors here. So as you can see, we have a lot of solar activities going on right now. So we have about almost 30,000 solar panels that generate almost 12 megawatts of power. We have 100 plus electronic vehicle charging stations. And we're very active of late in promoting more sustainable fuels. So for propeller craft, the fuel that is coming out now for those types of aircraft is this unleaded propeller fuel, and it's relatively new in the industry. And we were one of the first airports to have the ability to pump this unleaded aviation gas, and we've done more than 2,000 gallons already in 2022. And we're also one of the highest users from any general aviation airport for sustainable aviation fuel, which is for jets. As you can see, more than 453,000 gallons of sustainable aviation fuel delivered 2022. And many of our operators are really committed to try to use sustainable aviation fuel and wood where the supply able to keep up with the demand for them. So we're doing a lot of things to try to promote more sustainable aviation fuel capacity and development. And then 48% of our vehicle fleet is electric or alternative fuel. And we've had more than 12,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide offsets through our sustainable activities. We also are in the process of putting, we have an RFP out for even more solar, including a solar farm out there in a big region. So we'll be adding additional solar panels as well. So we are committed to sustainability in Van Nuys, and our partners also are very progressive in pushing sustainability measures there as well. Next slide. We've also tried to do as much as we can within the purviews of what we can do in regards to noise. We don't control the number of operations at Van Nuys. That is the FAA that controls that. So we try to do what we can within that purview. When the FAA changed the flight procedures as part of NextGen, we lobbied very hard with the FAA to try to get them to change the procedures back to closer to where they were in response to a large community response to that. And we were able, after a lot of pushing, to get the FAA to redesign the departure procedures there to put them back to as close as possible to where before they were, as they were before next gen. So a lot of activity there to try to do that. We've also implemented a quieter nights program. We don't have the ability to put a curfew in place that restricts operations through certain times of the day or night. But what we have done is implemented a quieter nights program to try to reduce the amount of nighttime aircraft operations. And this is a voluntary program, but we work very hard with our operators to try to get them to not operate flights between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. And as part of this, we do a lot of things to try to promote this with them. And one of the things that we do is this is part of their Van Nuys Friendly Flyer Awards program, where we publicly acknowledge those operators who are acting more sustainably, and this is one part of that ranking for them. So we do try hard to get the operators to reduce their nighttime flying as well. So in regards to this particular council motion, we were asked to address the increase of perceived scheduled charter operations at Van Nuys. And I have to give you a little bit of background before we dig right into this. So Van Nuys is a general aviation airport. So it's not a commercial airport like LAX is. So LAX and others are certified under Part 139 with the FAA, and they're allowed to conduct commercial operations. And that's basically scheduled operations. So Van Nuys is non-certified in the sense that it's not a certified commercial airport, but it can run charter flights. And the regulations are in this area, when it comes to the item that we're discussing here, a little bit gray. So if I can just indulge you a little bit here. So when we talk about a scheduled passenger carrying operation, that's basically something where it's where an aircraft is configured for more than 9 passenger seats. So these operations that can only be conducted at a certified commercial airport. So if you have scheduled operations in an aircraft that's more than 9 passenger seats, you can only do that at a Part 139 certified commercial airport. But then you have unscheduled passenger carrying operations that say they may be conducted at non-certified airport, so long as the operations are conducted using aircraft configured for 30 or fewer seats. So it's in the activities that this motion specifically is geared towards is a situation where you have chartered operations that are where they're offering a specific scheduled flight, so a specific time for a specific origin and destination. Now that is arguably allowed if you are have a aircraft that has less than 9 passenger seats, but there are some that may be operating that have more than 9 passenger seats, and this is where there's this gray area. And we've worked with our attorneys to try to really understand what we can do and what we can't do here as far as restricting regulations. So we have worked with the attorneys, and our attorneys have basically, if you want to go to the next one, are giving some advice on this, and have suggested to us that we approach some of the operators there that we that we think might not be operating along the federal guidelines, and ask them for specific information regarding their flights, so it's very clear to us what they are and what they are not offering. And we've written out to 3 of these companies right now and are asking them for their information back by March 1st. And once we receive this information, then we're going to be working with our attorneys to understand whether or not we can take action with the FAA to be able to try to limit their activities. And certainly, we want to make sure that if somebody is operating in violation of the rules, that we preclude them from doing that at our airport. But we have to be sure that they are. And in this gray area, it's not clear how the FAA is going to come back. Until now, we've reported some of this activity to the FAA unofficially, and they have concluded that these operations, that the way they understand them, are operating within the regulations. But we still believe this is gray area and want to get more specific information to be able to come back to them. So that's the plan that we have. So if we could suggest that we have some time to be able to get the information we need to make a clear determination with the city attorney, and then we will approach the FAA accordingly based upon the interpretation from the city attorney.
Okay, thank you for that very informative introduction to us about Van Nuys Airport on behalf of our committee. I appreciate that. As you pointed out, all three of us are new to this role, and so we really do appreciate that that overview. Mr. Urbach, I have a question. As you are reaching out to these operators, what kind of information is it that you're requesting back from them that would help you assess whether they're falling into the guidelines or not?
Yes, we're asking them specifically what flights they're operating, what they're offering on the market for sale, what type of aircraft they're flying, all of the details around that are going to allow us to determine whether or not they're complying with the current regulations or not.
Gotcha. So do you have any kind of remedy, or are there any consequences if they don't cooperate and fully respond to your inquiries?
At that point, we would go to the FAA and request that the FAA help us with this endeavor for us to be able to determine this. And with the FAA, I guess we would argue that if they don't give us information, that we can conclude that they are operating outside of the regulations. But I don't think that will be the case. I think they'll give us the information. It will then determine how we interpret that information.
Okay. Has LAWA engaged with the FAA or the U.S. Department of Transportation or other government regulators about the increased jet traffic or the next gen flight paths? And maybe as part of your answer, there may be some folks here who aren't familiar with what the next gen flight paths, what that exactly means and entails. So maybe you can kind of give us a quick summary of that too.
Sure. The FAA implemented the next gen procedures to help maintain safer air operations in this region. The Southern California region is the most congested region in the country, and they were looking for things to do to help to ensure better safety of the operations. And generally, what it is that you identify specific targets where aircraft will aim themselves to be able to determine when they should make turns after they've taken off.
So are folks coming in at lower altitudes or on different paths than prior to next gen that might account for why communities are feeling some of these impacts differently than before?
You know what, if I want to see if my colleague Samantha is on here, because she's better equipped to discuss this. Samantha, are you on?
Yes, I am. Thanks, Justin.
Yes, Samantha.
Yeah, it's a great question. So that's exactly what's been happening is with the advent of Metroplex several years ago, they did change many of the procedures and the flight paths. In some cases, we found, especially in the Valley, that some of the departure procedures are flying more over the hillsides of the Santa Monica Mountains, meaning that they're lower altitudes. And so people who never experienced those flight patterns before are now experiencing them. So one of the slides I think that Justin showed that we're trying to work very hard with the FAA to go back to pre-Metroplex procedures as to the extent possible, which basically move those flight patterns further to the north in Van Nuys, less over the hillside residential areas, more over some of the major freeways and Sepulveda Basin where you don't have the density that you do now. So that's exactly what was happening. And so we're always looking out for that because it creates new noise issues in areas that maybe didn't experience them before.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Bricker. All right, I want to give my colleagues an opportunity to ask any questions that they may have. Councilmember Soto Martinez, do you have any questions?
No, it sounds like we have an incomplete report. Just curious, if there's going to be another sort of follow-up report back on this.
Yes, absolutely. After we get the information back from these operators, then we're going to work with our city attorneys to assess our situation as to what action we can take with the FAA, and then we will be reporting back on that.
Yeah, that's all my only curiosity. Thank you so much.
All right, yeah, Councilmember McCosker, do you have any questions?
Yes, great. Thank you. This is helpful, and I get that we're going to collect a little more information. When we talk about this ambiguity about where the rule lies or how it is interpreted, are we talking about the grant assurances? Are we talking about administrative rulemaking, the legislation, or all of the above? Is there some combination of things that we're comparing our interpretation to maybe other interpretations of the law?
Yeah, we're comparing it. The grant assurances are basically what the FAA gives us in order for us to be able to operate an airport.
Yeah.
And those grant assurances require us to do certain things. So we have an obligation to accommodate lawful operations, while making sure that they're safe and operationally efficient, and that we can sustain ourselves financially for that.
Mm-hmm.
But we have the obligation to make sure that the operations are being conducted in conformity with the applicable laws, and we have to do so in a non-discriminatory manner. Right. So we can't restrict certain people from flying in or out of the airport as long as they're within the federal rules.
So in the end, this is about the grant assurances, and we'll get information from the private operators, but in the very end, it'll be really an interpretation of how the grant assurances are enforced against us. When I say against us, I mean how we are in compliance with all this money that we got over the years to develop the airport. Great.
Yes. Well, it's the fact that we can operate an airport.
Yeah.
That we're given the authority to operate an airport.
Yeah. Essentially, I mean, I don't mean to diminish it, but in the beginning, the grant assurances are just that. They're the conditions for the granting of funds and opportunity to operate an airport, right?
It's mainly the certificate, yes.
Yeah. By the way, real simple. Is there? I mean, I'm sure the answer to this is yes. But there's a hotline, call in. Ways for folks. They hear a different noise. They think they observe it, or they do observe a different pattern. They can call. They call directly to LAWA.
Yes, Samantha, you want to talk about our noise hotline?
Sure. We actually do have a noise portal that people can access that not only can they file complaints about noise issues, they can actually get information about what flights are flying at that time, so they can really pinpoint where the flights are originating, what type of flights are being flown at that time. We have a whole education section about all of the different procedures and how people should be flying. And then we do reports on a regular basis on everything from early turns, which we track very carefully to make sure that turns are not happening too early, and a variety of other noise regulations. And we use the data that we get from the noise portal, as well as information we get from all of the flight trackers to distill that information. But very easy for people to come in, put in their information, pinpoint the flight, and then we follow up in our noise division and let them know what the source of it was. And we often contact the airlines if they were doing something inappropriately.
That's excellent. Thank you. Madam Chair, that's all I have. Thanks very much.
All right, thank you, Councilmember McCosker. So I want to thank and acknowledge LAWA for being sensitive to the concerns of the community. I don't live in or around the Van Nuys Airport, but I certainly do live near another major airport in LAX. And so I am sensitive to the impacts that these facilities can have on local communities. So I appreciate the diligence that you are already doing with the operators. And Mr. Urbachi, I concur with your recommendation that we bring this back once you've had an opportunity to finish gathering that information. So what I would like to do, colleagues, is keep this item in committee for now and request that LAWA return in 30 days, let's say, so that you've had time to finish your diligence with the operator and to confer with your attorneys about, what we as a city can potentially request of our federal partners to regulate this activity so that we can address some of the community concerns that have been raised with respect to this issue. So since we're going to go ahead then and continue this item, why don't we go ahead and move on to the next one? Mr. Clerk, if you would, please read item 3 for us.
Item 3, Board of Airport Commissioners report relative to approving the First Amendment to Contract DA 5466 with ABM Aviation, Inc., to increase the contract authority and to increase the amount of allowable capital expenditures for additional work performed or to be performed for the smart parking infrastructure system and garage improvements at LAX parking facilities, and administrative and categorical exemptions from the California Environmental Quality Act pursuant to Article 2, Section 2F, and Article 3, Class 1-1 of the Los Angeles City CEQA Guidelines.
All right, thank you, Mr. Clerk. Do we have any presenters on this item?
Yes, Chair Parker, I'm going to give a little bit of an overview, and then I'll let David Rich from our mobility team to go into the details of the item. So one of the things that when I first came here 6 years ago that astounded me was we had actually people in booths collecting monies at our parking lot. And, that was something that my experience is that, there's lots of technology that in place to improve that. And that led to a lot of the congestion that we had here because of the way the parking operations work. And it certainly wasn't customer friendly. So one of the things we worked on for a long time was how do we transform the way we do parking at our airport, and how do we do it in a manner that is more customer friendly, that is more efficient, that will allow us to generate more revenue and will mitigate some of the traffic impacts that our current operations had. And by the way, without losing the people, so it's not getting rid of the people in the booths, but putting them in positions where they are actually providing more customer support and better service for people who are parking at the airport. And so we engaged in an initiative to try to bring what we were called smart parking to the airport. And after a lot of work to do that, we determined what we wanted, and we had to go out and find partners that could help us to implement the solutions that we wanted. And we had to actually put some people in the industry together in order to get the kind of solution that we wanted. So in the end, after an RFP process, we worked with ABM, who is the main partner, but they have subcontractors who have technology and experience in how to generate more revenue from parking. And we worked with them to implement what we now have in our economy lot, our brand new economy lot, and in our lots in the central terminal area. Though we're still working a little bit on that. But this new solution now allows people to pre-book their parking. So you can go onto an application and you can see what parking is available, and you can pre-book it so that you know that you're going to have a space available in a particular lot. You put your information into the application, and when you pull up into the parking lot, it recognizes your car and the gate opens up. And we have a lot of technology in the parking lots themselves to guide you to an open space. And then, when you pull out, it also recognizes your license plate if you sign up for that. And then you leave and your credit card is charged. So it's a contactless, really efficient solution for parking. And we've gotten very, very high customer experience ratings. Passengers love it because they know exactly which lot they can go to. And by pre-booking, it also allows us to market our activities, and people can get discounts by pre-booking as well, and at many times. So it's also helping us to drive more people to our lots, and it's helping us to increase the amount of revenue because we can dynamically price the parking offerings such that we can give deep discounts for times when we normally don't have a lot of parkers, and it kind of lures people to come to our lots based upon the rates. Also helps us to push people to our economy lot instead of parking in the central terminal area, where our lots often get very full very quickly. So the solution for us has been a huge success, both from a customer experience, from a revenue perspective, and it's won awards. So we've won awards for the parking solution as well. So we're very happy with the result of this, and it's helping us to significantly increase our parking revenue than we had even pre-pandemic. So for all these things, it's been a success. It was implemented as a commercial type of an initiative. It's not like we were building lots, but they had to implement a lot of equipment and upgrade a lot of the parking lots in order to install certain equipment. So it was a very complex project given the timing and the of the parking returning back from the pandemic, and some interfacing with the People Mover project and everything. But I'll let David get into the particulars of that. But just ultimately, we're very, very happy with our smart parking solution, and it's helping us really to improve the parking and increase our revenues.
Thank you.
David, you want to get David?
Sure thing. Thank you, Justin, and good afternoon, council members. David Rich, Deputy Executive Director for Mobility Planning and Strategy. And as Justin mentioned, the intent of smart parking has been twofold. It's been to create a first of its kind, best in class airport parking experience, but also to give enhanced value through higher revenue, lower costs, and more sustainability through EV charging, which has been a major component of this as well. And this is a 7-year operational contract, but it has a capital component, and I'm going to focus in on that. The capital component of the project has included completing long needed work, such as replacing asphalt, restriping all levels, painting walls and ceilings, waterproofing, in addition to adding new smart parking features, such as parking guidance systems, the new access and revenue control systems, a new IT system, digital signage, and the new EV charging equipment. This was a dynamic capital project. It was spread out over 9 separate garages. We launched the project during the pandemic, and we encountered complexity and had to adjust to the shifting demands of the traveling public as they returned to the airport. Our initial project concept was to close whole garages in order to complete the work as quickly as possible. However, we were quickly forced to deliver the project in a different way. As the pandemic receded, passengers returned to LAX faster than we initially projected, and they did so in their personal vehicles at a much higher proportion than we anticipated. This necessitated that we closed garages by levels rather than whole garages at a time. And we had to complete the work in a slower, more phased approach. This was a major change in approach. It was positive from a revenue standpoint because we could keep serving those that demand as it came in, and it allowed us to ensure that we had adequate space for our guests. The second thing we encountered is we did add scope to ensure new smart parking systems performed to the level we needed to ensure a positive parking experience. This is very new to airports, and as we went along, we discovered things that we really had to do. One example was the decision to implement a robust independent IT network for smart parking, which would ensure proper delivery of the customer reservations, amongst other benefits. Finally, we encountered unknown conditions, particularly in the older central terminal area garages. Some of those go back to the 80s. And we experienced some interface issues as the much larger automated people mover project touched upon most of the CTA garages through installations of the CTA stations and pedestrian bridges. While adding costs to the capital budget, we were able to save from the operational budget since the contract began, and that explains why we're not asking for the same amount of authority as we're appropriating to capital here. And in addition, I want to point out, as Justin pointed out, that the business case for smart parking is strong. Our revenue now exceeds by 50% in the fiscal year what we earned just prior to the pandemic in 2019, when we had much higher passenger volumes. Just this past weekend, as an example, we filled our economy parking garage, where about 85% of our patrons pre-booked their spaces, so that the system is working. If you grant your approval, we can compensate ABM for work performed, and we'll fund remaining work in parking structure 3, which we are starting next month. I'm available to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rich. I really appreciate that. Just a couple of questions. So it seems that a lot of the items that were added, the new IT system, the signage, the additional EV infrastructure seem very valuable to LAWA and certainly to the traveling public generally. But when those sort of dynamic changes are made, is there, just generally, is there some sort of analysis or assessment about how that may impact the amount allocated in the contract authority?
Thank you, Councilmember Park. So what I'll say is, you know, this was pretty dynamic and we were moving quickly on this. As an example, the IT infrastructure, we just had concerns it wouldn't work to the level that we needed it to work. So it's something that we had to do. And we had to make the decision quickly as to not incur more costs. But, you know, I think the processes could have been improved in terms of getting out in front of the impact it would have on budget. Quite frankly, this was something of a unique project, and the means of delivery, it being kind of a 7-year operational agreement, and this was just a capital component. But I think, you know, there certainly are process things in going through each of these approvals, but we and the contractor were moving quickly, and we did authorize that it be performed.
Okay. So the changes here to the scope of work were made with LAWA's approval, right?
That's right.
Okay, all right. So just, this is a really specific question, but according to Exhibit F1, there was $420,000 being allocated for completion of the P3 garage improvements in the central terminal area. In light of some of the challenges that you encountered in the other parking structures, do we think that there's going to be additional cost with the completion on that one?
No, the scope is very well known in this case, and we have good commitments from ABM, who's starting the work in a couple of weeks, that they will not go over that amount. So that is a not to exceed amount. We would have to go back to the board, and we would have to go back to you if anything were to come up, but we're feeling confident that it won't.
Okay, all right. I don't have any further questions. Let me see if my colleagues have any questions. Councilmember McCosker, do you have any questions?
No, I don't. Thank you very much for yours, and thanks for the presentation. I have no questions.
All right, Councilmember Soto Martinez, do you have any questions?
I do. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Mr. Bachi, thank you for the presentation. you mentioned about no workers being lost because of this. Could you please explain like the discussions that have been happening around that?
Yeah, so these are all Teamsters workers, Teamsters Union, and we worked very, very closely and with the Teamsters Union throughout this whole project as we were planning it. And they actually supported the project when we went to the board because we worked with them to make sure that we were doing it in such a manner where they weren't going to it wasn't going to be something where these people suddenly were going to be taken out of their jobs because we were putting in this technology.
And what are their roles going to be now since
I mean, there's been some, I'm sure that since this is done, there's been a lot of attrition. So I'm not sure, but at the time, the idea was that they do have a lot of people who walk around within the parking lot, helping the people who park there to guide them to certain areas and providing other types of customer service.
And Justin, if I can add, so some of the folks that you're acknowledging are the ambassadors with their iPads. So people frequently do have questions about how to use some of the new systems in the lot. There are issues that do come up. There are questions about what their bill is. So instead of seeing somebody in a booth, you'll see somebody floating with an iPad and answering those questions. The other completely new category are valet attendants. So they're valet stands, and we're still bringing these up, but in parking structure 1, in parking structure 7, in parking structure 4, there'll be additional ones. So those are valet positions, and that will be growing. So there are a number of different positions, but you will see attendants in every garage.
Thank you. And then you said there's been attrition, so it sounds like it's been a while since there's sort of an agreement with the union. When was that agreement made?
That was those discussions were as we were procuring the solution. I don't remember actually, David, when we procured it.
So in October 2020, we approved it, and Ray Whitmer, president of Local 911, he was there to support that at the time. So the total numbers with valet is now over 200 attendants. So we've maintained a robust workforce. That's attrited from pre-pandemic of somewhere around 260 people.
Sorry, Alex, give me a second.
Hold on one second. Sorry, we were having a loudspeaker announcement here at City Hall. I appreciate that. Councilmember Soto Martinez, did you have any further questions?
Give me a second. It's still going off in mine. I've just probably so it went from 260 workers to about 200 now. You said.
Right, but I think there'll still be potential for growth, but that was again kind of worked out in agreements with the contractor and with us prior to approval.
Sure. Okay. When I hear things like technology and automation, I think about the workers. This is happening sort of industry wide. In the ports, in the hotel, it doesn't matter. It's happening everywhere. I would like to see a report back of like the effects that this has had on the workers. I've seen this happen so many times in bargaining. The idea sounds good, and then over time, because nobody's paying attention to it, what ends up happening is we start losing jobs. I would move to have a report back on this specific issue, because other than that, I don't feel comfortable voting in favor of it. I think companies have to be held responsible for technology that they bring in. And obviously we don't have the union here either, but anyways, I would like, I don't know if is that a motion I have to put here, but
We'd be happy to come back and report on that. I'm not sure it's necessarily related to the change, but we're happy to come back and report on that.
And so what I would like to offer to do here is move this with an additional instruction for a report back on the labor impacts that have been discussed by Mr. Soto Martinez. And I just wanted to acknowledge both you, Mr. Urbachi, and Mr. Rich, that I appreciate your commitment to engaging with the Teamsters and focusing on worker retention. I think that is a concern that all of us share, and it's something that I expect that we will see of you moving forward as LAX work continues in the years to come. Also, with respect to the acknowledgement that I heard from Mr. Rich about, this particular expansion of scope of work and cost, we could have, maybe been ahead of that a little bit better. I would also like to indicate here that one of the things that I would like to see from LAWA in your quarterly reports to our committee is just to include some updates about changes to scope of work and costs in contracts that are going to be approved by the City Council. We would appreciate that. So with that, I would like to move that we approve item 3. Mr. Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Chairwoman Stephen Hong with the City Attorney's Office. That item is with the the additional instruction for a report back?
Yes,
Just
Mr.
for
City Attorney,
clarification?
thank you. Yes.
Park,
Yes.
McOsker,
Yes.
Soto Martinez.
Yes.
3 ayes, and item number 3 has been approved as amended to include the report backs.
All right, we appreciate that very much. And that, I believe, brings us to item number 4. Mr. Clerk, if you could please read the item for us.
Item number 4, Los Angeles Department of Transportation report relative to proposed superseding freeway agreement with the California Department of Transportation in connection with the State Route 47 Vincent Thomas Bridge and Front Street Harbor Boulevard Interchange Reconfiguration Project.
Okay. Do we have any presenters on this item today?
Yes, Councilwoman. My name is Stephanie Magnin Rockwell. I'm representing the Port of Los Angeles, and I'm here with my colleagues Sarah Aziz and Sulai from our engineering division. So I'd like to share my screen now. And so I'd like to provide an overview of the project itself, in addition to the cost and the timeline, and then hand it over to my colleague Sarah, who will go over the actual freeway agreement, which is what is before committee today. So the SR 47 Front Street Harbor Boulevard project is a reconfiguration of the 2 off-ramps leading on and off to the SR 47, more familiar term is the Vincent Thomas Bridge. And there's a couple of improvements that are associated with this project. We are expanding the turn radius for the on-ramp here to give greater runway to merge onto traffic for the SR 47. We're also creating a separation of vehicular and freight traffic. Right now, it is a bit of a tight merge as you're getting off the freeway, and you don't have a whole lot of time to choose lanes. There's also poor line of sight as you're coming across there. So the off-ramp will be realigned to come onto Front Street to give a greater sight distance and increase safety and traffic flow here. Also adding some bike lanes and ADA ramps along the north side of Front Street closer to Pacific Avenue. The total project cost is $100 million, heavily grant funded from state, federal, and local funds, receiving $70 million in grants. The freeway agreement specifically will enable us to access the $13.4 million in TSEP funds that were awarded to us in the state. And so where we are with the project now is we've completed design, and we are before you today seeking approval for the freeway agreement, which will allow us to submit our package to Caltrans and move forward to the CTC agenda in the spring. And so now I'd like to hand it over to my colleague Sarah, who will go into greater detail about the freeway agreement.
Thanks, Stephanie. Hi, everyone. Sarah Aziz with the Ports Engineering. So the freeway agreement is a document that stipulates the understanding between the state and city regarding planned traffic circulation features of proposed freeway projects. It includes boilerplate language related to maintenance, construction, and acquisitions, in that it states separate agreements such as cooperative agreements or encroachment permits would be required in order to proceed with the actual work. Next slide. The freeway agreement for this project references two existing freeway agreements. Freeway agreement dated July 29th, 1960, which was approved for the construction of the SR 47 or Vincent Thomas Bridge, and freeway agreement dated May 18th, 1964, which was approved for access control and traffic circulation modifications along the Vincent Thomas Bridge, and it encompasses the freeway agreements as listed here on the slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. The proposed freeway agreement for this project that's before you will supersede in its entirety freeway agreement dated July 29th, 1960, and portions of the May 18th, 1964 agreement by updating the former Route 165 to Route 110, and also updating former Route 167 to Route 47. Below is an exhibit that is part of the proposed project freeway agreement, and the area in discussion that Stephanie shared on the previous exhibit is denoted with the circle on the exhibit here. And that concludes our presentation. We're happy to answer any questions at this time. Thank you.
Okay, I don't have any questions on this matter, so let me check in with my colleagues. Councilmember McCosker, do you have any questions?
Thank you very much. Yeah, I do have a few. Thank you for the presentation. I've heard some variation of this excellent presentation several times over the last few years. Broad support for these improvements, and really important. This is one of the most terrifying freeway off ramps in Southern California that I live through on a pretty regular basis. I do have a couple of questions. The big one first. So we have recently, and by the way, I'm totally and completely in support of this, completely in support of reworking the freeway agreement. The project is extraordinarily important. But we were recently notified that the deck of the bridge also has to be replaced. And over the next few years, we're going to be redecking the Vincent Thomas Bridge. Are we coordinating this project with that project? Because my concern is that we're going to have, instead of 18 months or 24 months, we could have 36. I'm making up numbers, but we could have if we do these in seriatim, we're going to have a much longer traffic interruption. Do you all know, Sarah or Stephanie, what's going on with the deck of the bridge?
Hi, Stephanie. I can answer this one. This is Sue Lai. I'm a harbor engineer with the engineering division, and we are in coordination with Caltrans. Caltrans briefed us a couple months ago and are showing us their options for while they're in construction of the bridge deck. And so we're looking at that to see how that would affect the construction of this project. And it may allow us to expedite our schedule while they're in construction. We still have to see.
Okay, so we are going to make sure that we're coordinating this and making and looking to avoid as much traffic interruption as possible, because we know there's going to be a lot of traffic interruption.
Most definitely. It's already a busy intersection that we'll be working at.
Yeah.
And then their work to compound it is going to affect traffic in the area greatly.
Are you planning, now I'll put the roof deck aside, I mean the bridge deck aside, put that aside for a second, just talking about this project, are we planning to keep this off-ramp and on-ramp open during construction, or are we going to close it down entirely?
I'll leave that question for Sarah to answer. Sarah's more familiar with the details.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Sue. Yeah, so we are proposing to maximize the amount of time that both on and off ramps at all locations remain open during construction. Our phasing is such that we'll minimize impacts to both the local roadway while there's construction to the freeway system and vice versa. There will be a period of time when we are constructing the conforms of the ramp to the main line where we will experience full closures, but we are looking to reduce that time as much as possible. Right now, we're looking at about a month for each ramp for closures, and we're looking to do it concurrently.
And we'll get plenty of heads up on that because that will will only leave Gaffey Street North and Gaffey, at Channel, and then Gaffey Street at the end for people to use. Now we'll just crush Gaffey.
Right. No, definitely.
Thanks very much, Chair. I have a couple of other questions. The other issue is that in anticipation of this, we've lost the dog park, on Knoll Hill. The dog park was something that was the trade when the port worked with Eastview, which was really, really great to create the ball fields. But then the dog park moved down to the basically the adjacent to the extra Caltrans property. And so the dog park is closed. And I put in a motion asking that we work with the port to come up with an alternative place for the dog park, which will be completely taken away from this area by this construction. So just put that in your back pocket. Let's just make sure that the powers that be at the port work with us on replacing the dog park.
Yes, thank you, Councilman. And I know our executive office is working with Rec and Parks as well as engineering to find a suitable replacement on that, and we'll respond to your motion as soon as we can.
I appreciate that. One last thing, just a scheduling thing. Huge event every year is Conquer the Bridge, which is a great community event right around the holiday. Will we be able to accommodate that through this construction?
That's a Labor Day event, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So no impact this year. It's likely that next year won't be impacted either, but perhaps in 2024. We'll take a look at the phasing, but there may be some impacts in that year.
Big community partner. We'll make sure we reach out ahead of time. An important Labor Day in the harbor is really, really important, and it's one of the signature events. I'm just completely in support of this. This is absolutely imperative that we do this work. It's going to be great for the waterfront development. It'll be very important to Rancho San Pedro and our One San Pedro project to make sure that we're, providing even more housing and affordable housing and replacing all of that project housing. So I'm all for it. And thank you, Chair, for letting me ask so many questions that are very particular to my district.
Those were great questions, Councilmember McCosker. Councilmember Soto Martinez, do you have any questions?
No questions, and thank you so much, Councilmember McCosker. I know it's your backyard, and you have my support on the dog park, just FYI.
So what's really sad is that I remember before the bridge was built. So I'm that old, guys. The bridge wasn't finished when I was born.
Well, this will be a great improvement for you to see. I want to thank our colleagues from the port for their presentation today, for their responses to the questions, their commitment to working with us and getting that dog park moved to a different location. And with that, I would like to move that we approve item 4. Mr. Clerk, if you would, please call the roll.
Park,
Yes.
McCosker,
Yes.
Soto Martinez.
Yes.
3 ayes, and item 4 has been approved.
Fantastic. Mr. Clerk, do we have anything else pending before the committee this afternoon?
Desk is clear.
Okay, well, I appreciate you all being here. Thank you to our callers who participated today, our staff from the Port and LAWA for their presentation.